Hi, everyone. It's Christina Herrick, produce editor for The Packer and host of Tip of the Iceberg. Thanks for joining us for another episode. This time we're going to be talking about advocacy, and I'm joined with our first return guest, Chris Pawelski, fourth generation farmer. Chris, I'm so glad you agreed to come on, and thanks for joining me.
Well, it's a pleasure, Christina. I can tell you that I've been interviewed over the years. I can't even give you the count, hundreds of times. And your last interview was one of my favorite, and I enjoyed it so much. I am thrilled to be asked to be on again. It was a great interview. Thank you.
That's because I paid you a few dollars to say that to all of our listeners. So, thank you for agreeing to flatter me before we get started.
It's true.
Yeah, so we were talking last time, and I think it was a great episode on mental health. So for our listeners and viewers who missed it, please go back into our history and take a check. It was a great conversation. But Chris, part of the conversation that you started, and I thought it merited its own conversation, was about advocacy. You kind of mentioned that you had gone to both state level and federal level to just talk about kind of what's unfortunately spurred some of your mental health issues is farmer returns and just things like that. So, talk to me about advocacy and what that means in the ag industry and how you got started.
Well, advocacy to me means you're articulating and fighting for on issues that are important to your business, important to your farm, important to your neighbor's farm, and important to farms across the country. So it's getting out there, making your voice heard, and trying not just to make noise, but also to try and implement change, try and get done what you're looking for. And how I got started was I had moved back. After I got married, we lived in Wisconsin for 3 years, and we moved back to New York in '93, back to my farm, and we worked part-time on it. And then starting in '96, I started farming full-time, and then we were wiped out by hail. And it was not just me; it was much of half the area was wiped out by hail. And I was one of the few farmers that had any kind of college education at all. And of course, my degrees were in communication studies, emphasis on broadcast film studies. So I was kind of like tapped to be the person to this person. So it was two aspects of it. And when I talk about it, when I talk about advocacy on the grassroots level, there are two main thrusts, and one is the actual what you think of in terms of like talking to legislators, talking to regulators, and trying to get your implement your changes and such. But the other aspect of it is what we're doing right now, which is talking to the media and getting your story out there. And basically, I like to quote The Godfather. And there's a scene in The Godfather early on when they're talking about whether or not after Vito Corleone is attempted to assassinate him, and Tom Hagen says, he says if we lose, like the judges and said, that's half our strength. And I would always say, half my strength was my ability to communicate in the media our message, and that's a vital part of it. You don't have that, it makes it much more difficult to get the other part, which is the implementation of what your agenda is accomplished.
Yeah, so, it's interesting, Chris. I did not have The Godfather on my bingo card of conversation topics to be brought up today, but I think it's a good point. It kind of leads into the next question. So, you alluded to this, that there are issues that come up, and obviously you're well aware, and I am too, and you can consider me media, although I feel like if you're in the ag media, you're a little bit more friendly to the kinds of challenges that farmers face. But why is it important? We could easily go into farm and fork divide and things like that. But, what is it about having to vocalize and talk about the challenges you're facing? Why is that such a need, and why is that so important for the ag industry?
Well, quite often there's example I always use, one of them is like when you go to Capitol Hill, and a lot of people have, some people do, and they go as part of a group and such like that. But if you've never been down there and you go, say, you're going to do some visits on the Hill in the one of the offices, the congressional offices, the 3 on the House side, 3 on the Senate side, you'll see that those offices, it's basically just a sea of rotating meetings. And I've been there, and there'll be, every office is filled with a staffer, whoever their portfolio, whatever they handle. They're meeting with someone or a group and such. As meetings, I've seen meetings in the hallways and such, and it's just a constant flow of meetings going on.
Yeah.
And the point there is, messages are getting to these legislative staff, and then in turn the legislators. And if you don't get your message out there, then there's no chance of what you're looking for to get implemented. And I had a great compliment once from Senator Gillibrand's former legislative director, and she said that we had worked with her, my wife and I, for a number of years. She used to work for Senator Schumer, then she was his first ag staffer, actually, and then she worked for this first Congresswoman Gillibrand, then Senator Gillibrand. And she said that she knew that, and I had built up a relationship with her over years, but she knew that when I came in to talk about something, I was advocating for a solution or an issue or so on and so forth that really did impact or help family farmers in New York State.
Yeah.
And she felt that was whatever I had to say. Now, that doesn't mean that whatever I said they listened to every time or did, but they knew that when they were listening to me, that they were getting information that was, from the field, as it were, that they could rely on. And if you don't do that, listen, then, there's the opposite side. When you're opposed to what you're trying to do, they're doing it. And so that's the key thing to keep in mind. If you don't, the other side is, and you want to get your issue, your message out there, and you want to try and affect that change.
Yeah, well, I don't think I told you. Maybe I did in one of our conversations. I've been a part of, in my previous role, I went with U.S. Apple on Capitol Hill days, and I was with the Michigan group, and maybe I'm imagining this, but I'm pretty sure that the group that left before us, that had the meeting before us, was with the steel industry, and they were talking about how great the tariffs were. And then here the Michigan Apple folks are coming in and saying how terrible the tariffs are. Right. But, if we wouldn't have been there, all that that particular senator would have heard was just how great the tariffs are, and not how much it would be impacting another industry. And so I think you brought up a point. I mean, this is just what I referenced is, voices are being heard, and you want to make sure it's the whole, I'm sure you've heard this. It's if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu adage. So yeah, I did not come up with that. I've heard that many times, but it's very true.
Absolutely.
So now I've got a question for you that I think are for the naysayers, right? And I know farmers are busy. A lot of them, they're doing everything they can. And you've talked about this, as part of your stress, and then adding on top of that, having to actually fight for, farmers. What do you say to those that say, this doesn't do any good? It's not going to make a bit of difference in the long run. It's just big money that's going to make the big impact. So what do you say to those people that say, it doesn't matter. I don't need to do this. Someone else will.
Well, I'll give you a very specific example, and I can sit here and I can give you dozens of examples that we did over the years. But I'll give you one specific example. In 2011, we were wiped out by Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee. It hit the onion growing area here at the absolute worst time, at harvest time. All of our expenses were in, and the Wallkill River flooded, and we were wiped out. And it was a devastating disaster. Yeah. And we had at my farm, Senator Schumer came in particular, and brought a representative from FEMA, and we walked him around, showed him, the damage. We had onions floating, or had been floating in squash that was destroyed, and it stunk and stuff. So fast forward to the following year, there was nothing. Congress passed nothing that year. Did nothing. There was a kind of the Tea Party was in control of the House, and they wanted offsets for disaster, which was a very unusual thing, not our experience previously. So nothing happened. So the following year, Hurricane Sandy happened and wiped out much of New York City and a lot of the damaged a lot of the East Coast. And when that happened in 2012, they did pass a substantial disaster aid package. It happened to, and they did, it happened to include Irene and Lee from the year before. And I saw Senator Schumer at Senator Gillibrand's New York Farm Day event. I think it was that year or the following year, maybe. And we were talking about it. And he said to me, he said the reason why he fought so hard to get Irene and Lee included is what he saw on our farm. So
wow.
That's the first half. Now, when that happened, New York's created a program, New York State did, because the money was allocated to the state, and they created a program called New York Rising. And we were the first farm. Our farm was the first farm to apply for aid. And as we're applying for it, we could tell that the application was a little fishy. We had, over the years, we had done, my wife and I, a fair share of loan applications, and we'd done a fair share of grant applications, and it was looking a lot like a loan. And we had our suspicions confirmed when one of the agents that was from the state agency that was assigned to help us with the application, because it was a very complex application, said, listen, this money is being diverted to not what it's supposed to be. And this person said, if you have political contacts, scream at them now, because you're not going to see a dime. And we could see that was happening. So and this was being done by then Governor Cuomo. He was diverting the money to where it shouldn't have gone, where it wasn't intended, and it wasn't going to go to what it was supposed to. And I did what she said, and I screamed, in particular to Senator Schumer, but other offices as well. And they brought pressure to bear, and that stopped. And it actually became what it was intended by Congress, which was a disaster aid program. And we were the first. Our farm was the first to apply and get it, and then numerous farms in New York State did as well. So those are one issue, kind of, but two examples of where that advocacy on the smaller level mattered, as far as it meant millions to help out farmers here. And again, that was just. It came down to my wife and I primarily. And, again, I didn't donate any money to anybody. I didn't do anything like that. It was just purely our voices. And it meant millions, it meant to us as, help, but it meant to also numerous other farms in the state, a lot of assistance.
Well, that's great to hear. And, it was that kind of question, I know, was a little bit of a softball in a conversation about advocacy, which is, of course, it's important. And of course, you need to have your voice heard, because the more collective voices there are, the stronger that message gets across to the people that make the decisions that directly impact funding in farms. But it is good to hear, because, I've heard it before. It goes, I just don't have time. It doesn't matter. All of those things. So, thank you for indulging me in that question.
That's a great question. And again, I hear that all the time myself over the years. I've heard that.
I'm sure.
And I can give example after example where that similar situations like that, where it meant actual tangible changes and results that have helped a lot of people. And it was just, it was invited Senator Schumer to come here and just to see. And of course, it's more than that. I mean, I followed up with emails and, sent pictures, and, it's not one shot deal. You have to do, there's work involved, but it paid off. I mean, without a doubt.
Yeah. And with emails, I mean, the nice thing is we live in the modern era where you can schedule an email. You might be writing it when you're done for the day. It might be 2 a.m. Hopefully not. But, it could be late in the time when you don't want to send that to a senator's office, but you can time it to hit their inbox when they get in first thing in the morning. Yep. And then, you could schedule a couple follow-up emails too, if you haven't heard. Yeah, we have technology on our side, but it does, to your point, it does take a little time and a little bit of investment. But, as you've kind of alluded to, the return on that is quite valuable.
Absolutely. And then you get what happens then too is you get a reputation, especially if it's found that what you're saying is true and the like, and benefits people. They come back to you, those staff and the like, as a source for well, what about this issue? What about that issue? And then you kind of like, it's like a snowball that rolls, and you get more and more opportunities to affect change.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So my next question is kind of where to get started. thinking about this, is it better to think about local, state, national? Where does someone get involved, and what's the most important place to affect change? Because I know policies are enacted at every level that directly impact farms and farmers. So, for someone tuning in, what's your advice for them to get started, and kind of what should they be looking at? Is it everything? Is there one place to maybe direct someone to get started and get their feet metaphorically wet in advocacy, and then build from there?
I would say that it's all the above,
Yeah.
and I've worked on issues on. Sometimes they actually intersect. Sometimes they're related. It's both a federal
Yeah.
and state issue, whatever. And sometimes I've just worked on local issues. And for example, like a few years ago, one of the roads where a lot of our onion crops are, the town of Goshen, illegally closed, and we had
Okay.
to take a huge ruckus to basically get them to reverse that, which we did. That was a local issue. The speed limit in front of my house was way too high. There was too many accidents, many involving farm vehicles.
Yeah.
We got it changed. That's local. Sometimes you build on local, and then local also can affect or can influence as far as on the state or federal level. So it depends on the issue. There are ag organizations that you're involved in that also work on these things as well, like Farm Bureau. I'm active in my county Farm Bureau and in the state Farm Bureau, which is good. But I always kept an eye. Sometimes they may not, if it's not policy, they don't work on it. So you just can't just rely on them. You have to be also proactive in yourself. And it's all above. I find that for myself, I more enjoy working on federal issues. Just the way in New York State, with state government, a lot of the power is held by, three key people, and you don't have as much. Your state legislators don't have, not saying they don't have power, but it's not the same thing as when you're dealing with a congressional rep or a person in the U.S. Senate. So I enjoy that more in dealing with them. But that doesn't mean I've worked on state issues as well over the years, and at times again, you can affect change there as well. So it's all the above, and a lot of times the local can build on. You can use it as a building block to if there is a federal or a national issue.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I kind of had a feeling your answer would be all of the above, because you're right. And I mean, there are pesticide bans that are sometimes put in place, and sometimes that affects farmers, sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of things, and especially as we've kind of hit on that divide between farm and fork, it makes it a really big challenge to make sure that those regulations are enacted that take into effect the business nature of farming and what you need to get your job done.
Exactly.
Thinking about issues, is there one particular issue that you think is the most important? We're going into a big election cycle. This is a time when a lot of issues are brought to the head. Is there anything in particular you want to draw attention to for our readers and listeners, since you kind of are talking federal level, and since this is kind of a national publication, is there anything in particular you want to kind of raise your hand and say, hey, pay attention to this, speak up about this?
Yeah, I would say, one of the overarching issues over the years I've worked on, and I highlighted this when I testified before the United States Senate Ag Committee years ago, is that the return that farmers get on their efforts. I mean, what percentage of the retail food dollar that farmers get is minuscule. And there was just a story on CBS News, just did a story last week, and it was about a program out of Rutgers. And this is the network that did this. And it was there's a program in Rutgers that's trying to encourage these new farmers. And, it's a nice proposal or nice program and such. But, and this came up in my testimony, Secretary Vilsack, this is under the Obama administration, when he was secretary then, had a proposal to, create 100,000 new farmers, like President Clinton created 100,000 new police officers. And, when we were asked, the farmer panel, when we testified about his proposal, my comment about that was, That's nice, but instead of trying to create 100,000 farmers, which is extremely difficult, why not make farming more profitable for those that are in it, and then our children go into it? My son is a perfect example. My oldest son loved farm work, but he didn't like how much money his parents earned or didn't earn, and he wanted to make a better living. And that to me, they look at, the age of farmers is the average age is increasing. It's like 58, 59. There's a reason for that, because of the fact that we're not making money, and there's no point in our kids, continuing. And as that continues to happen, and as farms go to business, you have bigger entities that are consolidating and owning everything. And as I said, during my testimony, we have consolidation, and a few handful of players control our energy production and such. And, do we really want that with our food production? Do we want a handful of large corporations, multinational or transnational corporations, controlling from the start to the sale of food? Do we want that as a policy? And I don't think so. So this is the number one thing we have to work on. Our legislators have to work on getting a better return for farmers. We have to. That's really key. Sorry about that. My son is in Cancun. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I mean, I think people that listen understand, we're all busy. We have busy lives. So, probably no one thought to expect your son sending beach photos or things like that. But no, I think that's okay. Well, I've hit my last question, which is just, give me, so this is advice for growers to speak up, and who might be hesitant. But in my mind, it's also kind of an elevator pitch. So, what advice and what would you say to growers to get them motivated and get them wanting to make a difference and speak up about issues related to farming?
It's natural to be nervous and talking to people. That's a natural feeling. But the first thing to keep in mind when you do it, whether you're talking to a reporter, trying to, and I'll tell a story about that in a second, but talking to a reporter or talking to legislative staff or the legislature themselves, you are the expert. You most likely know more than they do on this issue. They're listening to you as being someone who knows what the situation is. And I can tell you that how important it is to be prepared and to have a clear solution or idea in mind as well. Because my wife and I have served on previously Senator Clinton's Ag Advisory Panel, and then when Senator Gillibrand's now. And we would go to these Ag Advisory meetings, and the people there, the farmers would sit there. And I've been to, not just that, I've been to a lot of these meetings over the years, and the farmers would just complain, about this is no good or that's no good or like that. But then the legislator will look at them and say, well, what do you want us to do about it? And they'll, I don't know. You want to have, and Senator Clinton once told my wife, she really admired and respected us because of the fact that we didn't just complain.
Yeah.
We gave them, here's what we want you to do. We want this, and we would even write legislative language and things like that. She said, but she said, we are looking for things to do, how to help. We want to, and I've had other legislators basically say the same thing. How can I help you? What can I do? And if they don't hear from you a specific, not just the problem, which is important. Articulating the problem is important. Don't get me wrong. That's half of it. But the other half is you have to have an idea of a way in which to fix the problem. And again, you may be nervous about it. Don't. You're the expert. Quite often you're talking to a staffer who's relatively new and young. You're going to be older than them, and they're looking to you as being the expert. Number one, and number two. It is well worth the time, and I know farmers' time it's difficult. You made a reference sending emails at time. I wear headphones with a mic in front, and I'd be on a tractor, open air tractor. And I get a call from Capitol Hill. I'd either continue doing what I was doing, or I would stop the tractor and take the call because, yes, it's stopping me for a few minutes from what I'm doing, but on the other hand, it pays dividends down the road later.
Yes.
Minutes and so you have to look at it in ways it's not wasting your time. It's not time that's not well spent. It's time that's very well spent, and you need to do it because again, it seems like we as a society are moving more and more towards more citizen involvement in trying to affect change or trying to advocate or work on issues. So, and it seems like more and more elected officials and the like are looking towards citizens and their involvement. So, and again, my wife and I, we're not a PAC. We've never, never donated to anybody. And truth be told, I have never, and I've been doing this for close to 30 years, and we've had some significant accomplishments and changes like the federal crop insurance program and so on and so forth. I have never, and this is the God's honest truth, I've never, ever, ever, never had a legislator ask me for money or fundraise for them, ask me to gather votes for them or to vote for them. I've never had that happen. They've always done what they've done because of the righteousness of the issue. And I've never, ever had that asked of me. There's never been a quid pro quo. And that's the God's honest truth.
That's great.
And we've gotten, significant changes. So it takes effort, but it pays off. And I would say definitely do it.
I think that was a great elevator pitch. And I think it's interesting. And thank you for bringing up the point about, this isn't a tit for tat. This isn't a I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of relationship. Yes, I'm sure it might have. Well, we don't need to get into that, but it's nice to hear for those that are hesitant that think this is just going to turn into you ask for help and then they're going to ask for your votes and get you on all kinds of email chains and things like that. And what you're talking about is more relationship building, which I think is important. And I think that's another theme of this conversation is you want it to get to a point where you're a trusted resource on agriculture issues. Exactly. And that the legislator or their office will come to you as things are being enacted, as things are being discussed to find out what issues are relevant and what issues aren't. And I think that's critically important. As we've talked about, already, if you're not having those kind of conversations, you might be left out of the conversation completely. And what you end up getting stuck with is maybe something that isn't even feasible or works.
Exactly. That's that's so well put, Christina. That's exactly. I'm going to bottle that what you said, and I'm going to make a presentation. I'm going to just play that right there because what you said is just spot on. That's exactly. You said it better than me.
Well, we've been talking for a while, so you rub off on me. But yeah, that's all the questions I had. So, I appreciate you joining me and talking with me. I think this has been an absolutely great conversation, Chris. We'll have to do this again. I mean, I feel like you're a willing guest. So I'd love to have you back on again, and we can brainstorm some topics and some more talking points in the future.
I would be honored. And again, this interview is one of my favorite interviews as well. And I can't even, hundreds over the years. And that's not exaggeration. Google my name, you'll see hundreds of interviews. And this is also one of my favorite. And like I said, I'm going to use what you said at the end there because how you put it was fantastic. One more thing is, I am available for speaking events. So if you have an organization or such that is actually interested in this and would like to know more specifics in more detail, I am available to come to your event or whatever and speak to you and talk about what to do, how to set it up, how to go about doing it.
Well, I'm going to Venmo you some money now for saying another great thing about me on camera. So thank you again for joining me. And I'll say to our listeners and viewers, if you like what you hear, you can catch new episodes of Tip of the Iceberg on your favorite podcast platform like Google, Spotify, Apple, and more. And that's a wrap for this edition, brought to you by the Packer Produce Market Guide and Farm Journal. Join us again soon for more industry insights.